Hello, everyone, and welcome again to our YouTube channel. My name is Salim Khan. I am head trainer at high school prep, and today we'll have a discussion on how to handle data sufficiency in your GMAT test well. And today, what I'll be answering is all the questions related to data sufficiency, how to prepare it, how to handle it well. Hello, Sneha. So I think we can start with the questions. I'm sure a few of you have already joined this session, so I would really love to answer all your questions or queries or doubts related to data sufficiency and GMAT. So we'll directly start with the questions. Okay, so we have a question: what makes data GMAT data sufficiency challenging? See, whenever you face any competitive exam. Okay. Generally, what type of questions you get is we call them problem solving, wherein you have a question and along with that question you get a few options, right? So when you have options, it's comparatively easy to get to the answer because in that, if you have options, you can always plug in those choices in the given situation, and you can always get to the answer even if you don't know how to solve that particular question. Okay, now, the challenging part with the data sufficiency is it's a completely different format of the question, and usually most of the competitive exams do not have this type. So, for students, this is a very different and a new type, and obviously quite challenging as well. What makes it challenging is the format. Now, what they do is they give you a question, a basic question. Now, for that question, they do not give you the complete information. Okay, in that question. Now, suppose you need to find some value. Okay, what is the value of x? Now, they will provide two statements along with the question, and those two statements obviously are in the format of statement one and statement two. Okay, so basically, hello Akansha. So, statement one and statement two. So, you have a question, along with that, you have two statements containing some information related to the question that they have given you. Okay, now you have to read each of these statement, right? And the point that you need to remember here is please do not assume anything. Okay, read each statement individually. Also, do not carry the information of one statement to while you are reading the other statement. Now, after reading the information given in these statements, you need to decide which statement is sufficient to answer the question. So along with this, I'll tell you the types also, the answer type also, like what kind of answers can you give related to data sufficiency. Okay. So there is a specific order for the answers that you give here. Okay. I'll first explain that. You have five different options to answer questions based on data sufficiency. Now, with those two statements that I told you, right? Statement one and statement two, uh, the first answer A. This is standard and this remains fixed. So you should remember this. This is one important tip to handle questions efficiently based on data sufficiency. So the first thing, the first answer is A. And when do you mark your answer A? When data from statement one is alone sufficient to answer the question, but the data given in statement two is not sufficient. Okay. Now, answer will be B if your data given in statement 2 is sufficient, but the data given in statement 1 is not sufficient. In that case, answer will be B. Answer will be C when A, first and second, first and statement 1 and statement 2 are not alone sufficient, but if you combine the information given in statement 1 and statement 2, if you combine that information and this information is now sufficient to answer the question. So in this case, your answer is C. and your answer is D, when both statement 1 and statement 2 are alone sufficient. Means with statement 1 you can get to the answer, with statement 2 also you can get to the answer. Okay, so this is your option D. In this case you choose option D. And option E is when you are not getting answer by applying any method. Means both the statement alone are also not sufficient, and when you are combining the information, that is also not sufficient to answer the question. So in any case you won't be getting the answer. So these are the five choices, right? Now this is a completely different format. Why is it challenging? Because it requires a lot of your analytical skill, lot of reasoning, right? And this test your actually decision making. Because obviously what you are attempting here, why are you taking GMAT, is because you want to get into some management program, right? And after completing that you will be managers, consultants, right? So or maybe you will be on some managerial positions only, where you are required to make some decisions. And for making decisions at these positions, information is always not sufficient, right? So with the kind of information available, how accurate you make your decisions along with the knowledge that you have is what makes this type challenging, right? Because this clearly checks your decision making skill simply, and all the associate skills that are required to make a decision. Okay, so I hope I answered that question. That is why is data sufficiency challenging, and the format in which you get to get these questions. So that includes a tip also. That tip was, please remember the options, right? This order remains same. Like option A will be statement 1 alone is sufficient, 2 is not. Option B, statement 2 alone is sufficient, 1 is not. Option C, 1 and 2 individually are not sufficient, but their combination is sufficient. Option D, when both alone are sufficient, statement 1 is also sufficient and 2 is also sufficient, alone is sufficient. And E, when neither of them are sufficient, means either alone or the combination is also not giving you the answer. So these are the five cases. Then we have another question here. Also, how can I improve my time management or data sufficiency question? See, time management is directly proportional to the number of questions that you have solved, that you have practiced. So the more you practice, the more efficient you will become at this type, and the more time you will be able to save, right? Along with the few tips that I'll be covering in the coming up questions. So obviously, if you use this tip, the first one I've already given you, that is remember the order of the options. That is one tip that helps you in obviously saving time. Then we have another question here. How can I build a personalized study plan for data sufficiency? See, personalize, I would say, कि you just take up a few tests, okay? A few tests, and before your preparation. So when you take a few tests, you get to realize that how good or how bad are you at this particular type or handling this particular type, right? So obviously for each individual it will vary, because a few people are very good in math also, and their decision making is also good, so they will find this type okay and they will not find it challenging. But a few people who do not have the concepts of maths very good, because you actually need in-depth knowledge of all the concepts to handle data sufficiency very well. Why, I'll tell you that also. So it vary accordingly. So just take some test, and you each one of us know key how good or bad our basics are when it comes to quantitative reasoning, right? So just analyze that. If you feel that your basics are not that good, so I would recommend you to first uh, be thorough with your basic concepts of algebra, of arithmetic, right, of geometry. You get to see questions based on all the types. So first thing is obviously to be well versed with all the topics and with the basics of each topic. Number system is the favorite one for GMAT people. Like they give you a lot of questions based on data sufficiency on this topic on number system only. So I would recommend, if you want to make a personalized plan, just First, take a few tests, analyze where you are lagging. Is it only this type that is like you are finding it difficult or maybe easy? And the other thing that you might not be able to handle this is your concepts are not that strong. So I would recommend you to obviously be well versed with it, or if you want to take the help of some professional, please go to them and just take a few sessions to be good, to be able to understand all the concepts well and to be able to handle these types well. Okay. How can I build personalized study plan? I guess I have answered that question right just now. So it's just that first you should take a few tests and see either you might be weak with your concept or you might be strong. So if your concepts are strong, as I told you, if your concepts with maths like algebra, particularly algebra, arithmetic and geometry are strong, you won't find it challenging. But if they are weak, then you should first brush up your concept and be very good at it. Also, I wanted to know what resources are recommended for additional practice of data sufficiency. See, if we talk about resources, we get two kind of resources. One is official, other is unofficial. Okay. So if we talk about official sources, it's like you already have GMAT Club. If you have an account there, it's good. If you don't have, just make an account, and they keep posting a few challenging questions or set of questions. So there you can get some very good questions. And then you have this book that we call it as official guide for GMAT, right? That is official material. So that is one book you can refer to solve the questions. So these are official sources. Unofficial में तो you have a lot of options like Manhattan, you get to see Kaplan, you get to see Nova, Barron's. So there are many other options if you go with the unofficial sources. With official, obviously OG I always recommend. OG is official guide. So official guide for GMAT I would strongly recommend. So that is the first and most authentic resource that everyone should have to obviously practice questions for GMAT and practice tests for GMAT. Okay, I'm waiting for questions. Okay, so one thing I would want to cover, I don't have a question right now, so maybe someone will ask a few questions. So before that, I would want to cover a few things related to data sufficiency only. I told you that like command on the concepts of algebra, geometry, arithmetic, you have to have good command over these types. Reason being, see, this type is data sufficiency. So here, uh, they are not wanting you to find the values. Like in the other questions, they give you the data and you solve the whole question, like you solve the other questions in math. So here also, you have data, but they are not wanting you to find the exact value. Okay, so don't get into finding the exact values for the given question. Okay, here you just need to understand that whether the given information is sufficient to answer the question or not, right? Whether the given information is sufficient. That's why we call it data sufficiency, right? Because you have a question and related to that you have some data given in the statements. Now basically what you do is you just read that piece of information that is given in statement 1, statement 2, and then you obviously try and understand ki, is this information sufficient to answer this question or not, right? So you will only be able to like understand this whether this piece of information is sufficient or not when you yourself have knowledge about that particular topic, right, or that particular question. Like there are many types of numbers. So if you get to see a question based on types of numbers, right, you have to have good understanding over numbers. If you don't have good understanding over those numbers, then it would be very difficult to answer that question. Okay, so we have a question. Is it okay to take a guess uh, on data sufficiency question if I'm not sure? See, that I leave it to the candidate's choice, right? Because I don't prefer for GMAT, I don't prefer marking any option without knowing the answer, right? Because that affects your overall score. GMAT, as we have discussed in our previous session also, that GMAT is a test which is obviously adaptive, right? So it's a computer adaptive test. So obviously your answers, whatever answer you mark here, will be affecting the next question. Okay, so that is why I don't recommend, but then it's completely up to you. It's individual choice. It's not like I will give you a standard approach for that. No, if you don't have an answer, then it's completely up to you whether you want to leave it or mark something on it. Okay. What are the most common types of data sufficiency questions? See, uh, types to if we would talk. So types are there are two types mainly. Okay, one is value based data sufficiency question, and the other is yes no based, right? Means with the given data, you just need to understand whether this is sufficient or not. So yes is a definite answer, no is a definite answer. But if you don't have the clarity, like in some cases it's yes, in some cases it's no, then you say that okay, the information is not sufficient. You call information sufficient only when you get a definite answer, means either a yes or a no. Yes is a definite answer, no is a definite answer, right? But if you're getting for few conditions, if you're getting yes, and for few other conditions you're getting no, so it's fluctuating, right? So there is uncertainty. So whenever there is uncertainty, you say that data is not sufficient. But when you have the clarity that yes, if it is giving you a yes, a definite yes or a definite no, then in that case you say that yes, the given data is sufficient. So mainly if we want the types, so these are the mainly two types. One is value based. Value based means with the given information you can find the value of the unknown. And yes no type is obviously with the given information you are able to understand whether this data is sufficient or not. Yes is also a definite answer, no is also a definite answer. But as I told that if there is uncertainty, that for few cases you are getting yes, for few cases you are getting no. So in that case, you say that the given data is not sufficient to answer the question. Rest all the other type is obviously we can segregate further categories based on the topics. Topics means number system, then we have equations, inequalities. So those types are obviously we can have data sufficiency question based on all the topics. So on the basis of topic we can have categories, but majorly there are two types, either yes no or value based questions. Okay, I'm waiting for questions. Okay, and as I was discussing separately, uh, as I obviously told you guys, कि, this type obviously is wanting you to just test whether the given data is sufficient or not. So you just have to see, right, whether the given data is sufficient, and for that you have to have a good understanding over the topics. Because if you don't understand the basics of math, then you won't be able to decide whether the given data is sufficient or not. As simple as that. Are there any time-saving techniques, especially application applicable to data sufficiency? Yes, the first tip I already gave you guys when I started the session. That is, you should remember the order. Order means what is option A? Option A means one. Statement 1 alone is sufficient, 2 alone is not sufficient. Answer will be B when statement 2 alone is sufficient, 1 is not. Answer will be C when 1 and 2 alone are not sufficient, but their combination. But when we combine the data, it is sufficient to answer the question. Option will be D when statement alone is sufficient and statement 2 alone is sufficient, right? And answer will be E when you cannot find the answer, or when the given data is not sufficient to answer the question, either alone or the combination is not sufficient. So this is one tip. Second tip is कि when you are reading these statements, right, read them separately. Do not first of all assume anything. And when it happens, most of the time it happens कि once you have read the first statement, that information somewhere uh, stays in your mind, right? And you read the second statement in context to the first statement. So this you should avoid while handling the question, right? You should forget everything while reading statement 1 and while reading statement 2 alone. So you have to first always check whether each of the given statement is alone sufficient or not. And if you want to understand that, you have to read them separately by forgetting everything that is already there in your mind. Okay. So this is one important tip. Then another important tip is you may just put the values, like when they give you some conditions, you just plug in, we call it plug in some values. So you just plug in some values, okay? And by plugging in, by putting in some values in the condition, you will be able to analyze ki whether these values satisfy the given condition or not, right? So you should always plug in values in the given condition. That is one important tip, okay? And when you are plugging in the values, do not always think that only the natural numbers means positive integers 1 2 3 4 are the only values that we should plug in. No, you should always plug in all sorts of values, positive values, negative values, even the decimal values. Values between 0 and 1 have different property. Values that are greater than 1 shows different property. So this is one common tip. So we have another question. What are the common mistakes that test taker often encounter in data sufficiency questions? So I think I have covered this question, but then I haven't highlighted it. The most common mistake that students make is they assume some information that is not mentioned in the question, and you have to practice a lot to avoid this, because it's very difficult to avoid that, because you already have some information, some data in your mind, you have studied a lot, you have solved a lot of questions. So what happens is ki whilst reading that statement, which you want to see whether it is sufficient to find the answer or not, it happens that you at times assume things which are not actually mentioned. And after reading the first statement too, it becomes like uh, very very certain key. The second question, if you read, by default that information in the first statement gets attached to the second, and you feel that okay, second is alone sufficient. So this is a very common mistake that students make here. Okay. Rest although I believe we are able to handle, but then this is the common information, because while handling data sufficiency, you have to be very clear about what data is given and what data is not given. Also, one tip, that it is very difficult at times to understand whether the given information is sufficient or not, but it is comparatively easy to understand whether the given statement is insufficient, right? Because understanding that is easy. Why? Suppose if there is some information given in the question, okay, that is, suppose x is greater than x square. So x is greater than x square. If you have this information, then what is the value of x? To find the value of x, then you might have some condition. That one condition is x is lying between 0 and 1. So if x is lying between 0 and 1, x will always be greater than x square, right? So this statement alone is sufficient. Okay. Now if they say separately that x is positive, so x is positive is by default included in this one. So your answer will be A, many students what they do is they select option C, and they assume that the combination of the information is sufficient. So you have to be clear here that you don't just assume that okay, if one alone, as I told you, you have to see each statement separately, right? Separate piece of information. Okay. Now, if you somehow combine the information in your mind, which is not the correct thing, which is not the answer also, but if you combine them, then you will obviously pick up option C instead of option A or option B. So this is a very common thing, and as I told you, ki many people assume, right, some information. So that also will lead you towards answering wrong for this question, right? So that is there. Any other questions? So from my side also, I believe I have covered the required tips and things related to data sufficiency, like how to handle data sufficiency question well. And I guess we have a set of questions wherein I believe if you have answers to all these questions, you will be able to manage data sufficiency very well. So I will then end the session here only, assuming that no more, we don't have any more questions now, and hope this session was helpful to you guys, and all the best for your preparations. You can always get in touch if you have any other questions with us. Please subscribe our channel, and we'll soon meet again. Thank you, everyone.